What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Somewhat Sports Podcast. Introducing all of you beautiful lads and ladies into this episode. You hear my voice, you know who I am. It is Iceman Jurg. And you guys know what it means when I am the first voice you are hearing in any given episode. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. That means that, sadly, our fearless leader, Chris, is unable to be here leading the proceedings this week. He is doing a bunch of adjustments and building over at Castle Chris right now. He's adding a moat to his fine establishment where he is right now. I think there's going to be an alligator pit there at some point, if I had to guess. So it's going to be the top tiered, most fortified place in all the land, or the five boroughs, either or. And unfortunately, Dame is not here this week. Dame is going to be using all his field work / PTO he can almost for the rest of 2023 at this point. So Dame is not here. So I know you're all scared right now. You're thinking, oh no, there's going to be just a solo Jurg episode. No. I've said it before. I'll say it again. That is not happening. And I will not allow that to happen to the beautiful people. So that being said, I have a guest with me today. A friend of the show. He's been on a number of occasions. He's been on to talk football. He's been on to talk baseball. I think we had him on the NBA draft one time, which was kind of a weird thing for him to be on in hindsight 2020, but he trooped in like a soldier because this is a good man right here, ladies and gentlemen. I've done many a podcast with him, and I'm very, very glad and proud to bring him back onto the show. My guy, the baseball don himself, James Barcia. James, Bars, how we doing?
Let me tell you, Jurg, there was a couple sneaky picks in that NBA draft, all right? You guys laughed at them, but there was a couple. Whatever that point guard the Knicks drafted in the second round, you guys thought it was a bad pick. They went right for him, but I'm doing great, bud. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. You know, sports-wise, I'm in a little dark place. I'm not going to lie. Fantasy teams aren't looking hot. Giants, Maron, I don't even want to talk about it. Yankees got Soto, Ohtani's out. Like, you know, it's just there's not really much optimism in the sports world. So I got a lot on my chest, but I'm glad to be here with you and talk about it, you know?
Yeah, you know, Chris may not be here, but honestly, that's probably close to what he would be feeling at this moment. So really, the energy has not exited the podcast in any way, shape, or form. And kind of giving the people a preview of what we're going to be talking about, what's going to be headlining this episode. Guys, you already know what it means when Bars is here. That means this is going to be an all-baseball edition of the Somewhat Sports Podcast, and we're going to be hitting the big points. We waited to record this episode because we knew big news was going to be dropping relatively soon for when we started talking about doing this. And finally, Bars, we get to do an episode right within a time span of big news happening. You know, it tended to break every single time after you and I have recorded, or even after we've recorded here at Somewhat Sports. So finally, we're doing this with a proper timeline. But, you know, the two biggest transactions that we were waiting to happen in this baseball offseason, this very young baseball offseason, have both occurred in pretty short order. No long, drawn-out ordeal here, Bars, which I think I could speak for you and I, Dame as well. I think most baseball fans, like, we're happy it doesn't need to be a whole like winter of this stuff wondering what's going to happen. We have the answers succinct here. We're going to be talking about Juan Soto, who was traded from the San Diego Padres to the New York Yankees and the ramifications it has on both sides. We're going to be talking about Showtime, the best player in the game. He's finally been signed to a massive money deal, staying in Los Angeles, just not with that garbage team in red, and all the implications that have with that. And we're going to be doing a brief overview of free agency, because this is a pretty solid free agency class as a whole, with some good names, both in terms of arms and batters. And we're going to just be naming, you know, the top names relatively, and what teams could look to be aggressive here now that the two biggest names on the market in terms of trading / free agency are gone. So we're going to be doing that. It's going to be a good one today. Bars, you ready?
Always ready, bud.
Let's do this, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start out with the first of these big transactions that happened, I believe, a little over a week ago, maybe a week and a half at this point. Whereas the future of Juan Soto was something to behold in his time. When the Padres made that move, we knew it was going to be an all-in move and pretty short-term move, because with the money they already had on the books at that point, and even more money that they spent earlier in this year, mind you, with the re-upping of Manny Machado's contract, Juan Soto was not long for San Diego. So we knew at some point he was going to be finding his way to a new home, and that has happened. Juan Soto is now a New York Yankee, along with Trent Grisham. So the Yankees did not get not only got one, but two left-handed outfielders that can hit relatively well, but we know Soto is the real prize here. Watch Trent Grisham hit the first game-winning home run between these two somehow. Anyways, no, in all seriousness, Juan Soto and Trent Grisham both being traded to the New York Yankees in what ends up being 5 players going back to San Diego. Those 5 players being Michael King, Drew Thorpe, Johnny Brito, Randy Vasquez, and Kyle Higashioka. That's my best attempt at saying that one. That's a tough one. Japanese names are a tough one for me sometimes. It is those 5 guys, 4 pitchers, and a catcher going over to the San Diego Padres. Bars, no need to really mince things here. We know who the biggest name in this trade is, so let's hit it for the team that got the massive star in this deal first, and that's the New York Yankees. The Yankees, it's funny because actually earlier in the week, I think when they acquired Soto, they had actually already traded for Alex Verdugo. From the Boston Red Sox. That actually got some Yankees fans worried, like, oh no, does that take them out of the Soto thing? Are they just going to be content as they've kind of been for a couple off seasons now? And, last time you were here, we talked about the trade deadline and kind of like the unwillingness of the Yankees to make these kinds of moves here for a good while now. But clearly it's shifted. They get Soto. What was your reaction when they made this trade?
One, I was surprised. I mean, surprised, but not really, because obviously for weeks you heard the rumors that they were in the whole sweepstakes for Soto. But I was one of the people where when they made the trade earlier for Verdugo, I was like, there's no shot they're using him as a trade bait, as a trade piece, which most of my friends who were Yankee fans thought they was. I was like, nah, man, that's your center fielder right there. That's it. Get ready for it. There's no Soto. Then as the days went on, it was more obvious that it was going to happen. And honestly, I think it's a home run for the Yankees, as much as I hate to say it. They did give up 4 prospects and Higgy. Higgy was definitely a locker room guy. By the way, Jurg, that's how you get around the Japanese name. I don't even try saying it. I just go Higgy straight. But it's, I think it's a home run because, yes, they gave up a bunch of pitching prospects, but when you really look at it, we already know the Yankees can't develop pitching. They haven't developed a pitcher in years. Most of their good pitchers, they're free agents, even if you look throughout time in history. Yes, of course, you got a couple from their farm system, but that's rare and far in between. And nowadays, I see prospects almost like I see NBA picks, which is just it's fool's gold up until that moment. You could see several prospects who were claimed to be the number one in their franchise's farm system, or just the number one prospect overall in all of the farm systems that just don't pan out. You look at Jarred Kelenic, who got traded from the Mets to Seattle. He hasn't looked good at all. He's been sent up and down like crazy. Now he's on the Braves. So is he probably going to become something? Probably, because it's Atlanta, but that's all right. We're going to ignore that. You look at, I forget his name, but he was a catcher that was originally part of this San Diego Padres. Francisco Alvarez. There you go. No, not Francisco Alvarez. Francisco something. But yeah, either way, he was part of this original Padres build-up. He was the number one catcher in all of the farm systems. And now I can't even remember the guy's name. I think he's in Tampa, but I think he got cut. So as I said, it's really fool's gold because there's countless other stories where there's these number one 5-12 prospects, can't miss. They should start sooner than later, and they just never work out. So I think it's great they traded the 5 pitchers. Most of them aren't even that young, if we're being honest. Yes, you traded King, who he was looking great, but as I said, you ended up with Soto for a year. If it ends up being you go to the World Series and you win it all, who even cares at that point? So I think it was a home run by the Yankees, but they really do need to re-sign him. If they don't re-sign him, it's a little questionable then. You didn't lose much. You did lose a lot of trade pieces, but you could get over it. And there's still rumors they're going to sign Yamamoto. I don't know how that's going to happen due to contracts and whatnot, but hey, we'll see, man.
Well, as we'll talk about with a player a bit later on in this episode, clearly baseball, there's some bottomless money pits here. And when, you have the Steinbreiners being the owners of your organization, despite the fact that, again, Yankees fans, Dame himself included on this show, has not been a big fan of them over the last couple of years. There's definitely money to be spent if you are the Yankees. I love the fact that you talk about the just prospects as a whole, Bars, because I think with the Yankees, they really can fall into that where just for a number of years now, the Yankees were gung-ho on keeping prospects. And the two of us being around so many Yankees fans, like we hear a couple of these kids and the hype around them. Remember Clint Frazier? That was the piece. That was the guy that they never wanted to trade.
Can't wait for him to start.
and very similar to Mejia, by the way, who you mentioned. I don't think Clint Frazier is even on a team anymore at this point. If he is, he's somewhere in the minors for somebody. So, that's just one of those things that happen. And what you mentioned with Mejia, funny enough, with his time with the Padres, he was actually traded to the Padres by Cleveland when they were gearing up for the playoffs. And then the Padres traded Mejia to the Rays for Snell back. So it's this whole connecting thing where it's like, hey, every once in a while, I get it because there have been trades in the past where you trade prospects and they become something. I totally get that fear, but not all the prospects are going to hit at the end of the day. And I think if you're the Yankees with the guys that you traded here, I think it's telling. And I don't want to say these kids can't have careers for the next, I say kids, some of these guys are exactly both our ages, but in terms of Brito and Vasquez, both two guys still very early in their careers. I think 2023 was the first time they both got some legitimate time in the majors. Two 25-year-olds, what can they be? What are they going to be? I think we're going to see what the best of what they will be over the next 2 seasons on what kind of player are they? Are they, end of the rotation starters, or are they going to be coming out of the bullpen for you? Drew Thorpe is probably the main piece here for the Padres. That's number one for them in terms of a potential starter, being the youngest pitcher of all of them at 23. And then Michael King could be either or. He actually did get some starts last season for the Yankees, which gave some people hope and definitely added some value here, as we saw, because I think in his starts, he had a 2 ERA or maybe even just above that. So he played really well. So that's there for the Padres. Want to hit the last point you made before we move on to San Diego's aspect of it, because I think this creates a very, catch-22 for the San Diego Padres with this deal. But we'll get to them in a moment. In terms of re-signing Soto, this is a team that already has 2 big $300+ million contracts on it in Aaron Judge and Garrett Cole. And technically 3 or so. I don't know if did Stanton's go above $300 million when he signed with the Marlins and he gets straight to the Yankees?
Yeah, but they deferred some money to the end of the contract, I believe. But
right.
Either way, yeah, I agree with you. I don't get it.
Yeah, there's already a couple big money deals here on this New York Yankees team. You trade the pieces you do, so you can kind of argue the analysis we just gave. It's like you don't know what you've given up. So in theory, it's not the worst thing in the world if you only lose Soto after, let's say, 2 seasons. Maybe he stays there for 1 more year. But at the same time, if you're the Yankees, you just got this guy. Why not re-sign him? So what do you think? If the Yankees are going to re-sign him, do you think they're going to make that a priority now, or do you think they're going to let things play out in 2024 before they have to come up to that decision?
I think they're going to let it play out. One, because Soto himself said whoever he got traded to, he wasn't going to really try and rework something. He was going to let free agency come because he's already turned down an extension. I believe it was for $440 million or something like that with the Nationals. And 2, he knows his value is going to take a hit if he signs now. So that's why he wants to test free agency, have the little auction go off for him. But aside from that, when it comes to the offseason, I don't know how the Yankees can sign him. You said it yourself, Jurg. They got 3 $300 million contracts already. They have Carlos Rondon's contract, who's about $28 million a year, which isn't a cheap number at all. You still got DJ for the next couple of years. That's probably easy to get rid of in the grand scheme of things, but that's still about $15 million right there. So
Rizzo as well is on the books for, I think, 18-20 mil.
He's probably another easy one to get rid of, though. Realistically, stretch it out, defer it, even just eat the money. There's ways to work around those smaller numbers, but as we're saying, they just add up to the grand scheme of things, which is how I'm guessing Cashman finally got yelled at by Hal to let's finally be the Yankees again. Because in my mind, I just don't see how they re-sign Juan Soto with all those contracts. And as I said, they're in solid position to sign Yamamoto, apparently, which is going to be another $300 million contract, if not more. So I'm lost right now with how the New York Yankees are going to do this. Part of me wants to say no, they're not going to. Not part of me. Most of me wants to say no, they're not going to do it. But with this Juan Soto trade, there's just a little bit of me whispering. Feels like the evil empire might be back. This might be the first move of something. So are they going to throw the money at the kid? I don't know. But this was definitely a good trade in the grand scheme of things, I feel like. It makes you, as a Yankee fan, feel like whatever Brian Cashman said in those winter meetings, which was he tried playing like he was smarter than the rest of us, you're going to ignore all that.
Yep, absolutely. And if you're the Yankees, you bring up the point here, is this only, despite this being such a massive move, is this only the first step into what they're taking into this offseason of rebuilding a team that, for all intents and purposes, they've been disappointing for a good while now and missing out on the postseason entirely. And not even just that, Bars, it's funny that in the sport where we talk about it's the hardest for one player to have an impact on this team, football even, or more so basketball and hockey, man, this team was just garbage after Aaron Judge went out. Sans for Garrett Cole, of course. If it wasn't Garrett Cole pitching and if Aaron Judge wasn't in the lineup, this team, you could chalk them up for a loss almost every single night, it felt like, in so many instances. For a team like that and constructed like that, you need as many names as possible, and this could be it. Again, Verdugo, let's not underestimate that. I think that was a nifty bit of business that they did right there.
Huge move.
and literally zero expectations. Think about Verdugo going to Boston. He was a piece in a trade, like a pretty good prospect, another former prospect that we could talk about, going to Boston. Not the highest of expectations, but some expectations, when you talk about being one of the important names back in a trade that the Red Sox had made previously. Now there's no expectations. He just needs to be a guy there to support the big guns, hit 15 to 20 homers, which he has done already once in a season, and just be a relatively consistent bat and defensive player in the lineup. Those are the kind of guys that the Yankees need to, start to get more around both Judge and now we could say Soto. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Yankees continue in this offseason. Like you said, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the top Japanese pitcher that's going to be available, that people are going to be sending in posting fees and making those offers sometime soon. There's going to be a couple big names going after him in terms of teams and value. And yes, the Yankees, they're not done yet, and maybe they swipe him too. We will see soon enough. We're going to be mentioning him a little bit later on. But before we move on from the topic at all, we've said everything I think we need to say about the Yankees portion of it, Bars. Let's go to the Padres aspect of it. The Padres, again, this is a team that previously went all in, made the NLCS, not in this past season, 2023, but the year before that in 2022, before losing to the Philadelphia Phillies, who ended up making the World Series, but losing to the Houston Astros. So this is a team that had a semi-recent deep playoff run, and a lot of people, and I'll say myself included, thought that this was finally going to be the year the Dodgers are starting to show a lot of signs. 2023 was supposed to be a year where the Dodgers were going to take a bit of a step back, maybe be a wild card team, not running the NL West. And it was supposed to be the Padres, surprising everyone, maybe beating them in the playoffs again and making the World Series. And an NL West team that wasn't the Dodgers did make the World Series. It just wasn't the Padres that did that. And to say the very least, shocking a lot of people what was this season. And now if you're the San Diego Padres, and I mentioned the catch-22 because the thing is you still have a lot of talent there that you've paid big money for. I mentioned Manny Machado earlier. They've already paid Fernando Tatis Jr. And, of course, Xander Bogaerts, who they had traded for previously from the Boston Red Sox. They already paid him his contract. Soto, that's part of the reason why I say Soto was always really a temporary guy for San Diego, because they already paid so much money. That was the case. And that was when their now former owner, who tragically passed away within the last month or so, Peter Seidel, rest in peace to him. He was a guy, Bars, that was willing. And ever since he was part of the ownership of the Padres, because he wasn't the sole owner at first, he was like part of a group, and then he became the sole owner later on. But his entire thing with the Padres was spend money, spend money, spend money. This man, unlike a lot of owners, was willing from day one to spend money to try to get this team to win. And the reason why I want to talk about the future here very briefly for the Padres, because now it's in a bit of limbo, because the guy who was so willing to spend everything, like spend as much as possible, he's not there anymore. And right now the ownership is still, it belongs to his family, but Major League Baseball, as of an update I saw from weeks ago, they still need to figure out the situation of who's going to be the new sole controlling owner of everything. Mm-hmm. And this is going to create a situation here where if it's someone maybe on the group as is for now, or if there's a not last second, but a very quick changing of hands here, maybe this team now gets sold from the family and this current group to someone else. I don't know if that's possible. I'm not saying that to be any type of truth, but there's different scenarios that can happen right now. But if you're the Padres with this ownership that is in limbo right now, and a team that is heavily invested in but just had a terrible season, what's going to happen to their future? So Bars, what do you see as the more immediate future, like the next 1 or 2 years for the San Diego Padres?
It's real murky, Jurg. Unless you got a glass ball that could see the future, it's almost impossible to really tell. Because if it does become a changing of the guard, as you said, what does that new ownership want to do? Do they want to blow up the whole thing, start from fresh? Do they want to keep fighting? Because you do got pieces here. You got players. That's a thing. That's a known fact. But let's not forget, due to the owner who unfortunately passed away, he spent a lot of money, and over the summer, they had to take out a loan to make those payments for the contracts they had. He was a spender, I'll agree with you. And he's the reason why the Padres even are in the discussion now, because I'm not sure if people remember, before Manny Machado got there, the Padres were almost unspoken of. They were forgotten about. Their brown uniforms matched their play. But it's real questionable, the future, because yes, they traded Soto. He was only a rental for that moment, because as the owner, it was almost a known thing. The owner knew his time wasn't long. It's almost like the Jerry Jones, where he wants to see that championship before he passes away. So it was a rental. It was an all-in move. Unfortunately, didn't work out this year. On paper, it looked like it should have. But you got the prospects back for that 1 year rental who you couldn't afford for the long time. I'm gonna guess that whether it's the same ownership or new ownership, I think you're gonna see a couple more pieces starting to move, because something about this feels like if it didn't work out this year, something's not going to work out in the near future if you keep trying to push this along. So I think it's a blow it up situation. It really kind of reminds me of how the Mets are looking currently, where we had that 1 year of success and now the next year looks nothing like it. It's an unfortunate thing, man, because, you never want to see a loved one go away. And this man really did bring the Padres, as I said, from the dumps, and he brought them to where they are now. And San Diego is one of the best cities in California, and I think that's largely due to this sports franchise coming up, and it's the last one in San Diego.
Yeah, and you mentioned the team and what the future of the guys who are on the roster could be. They're still going to get some losses this offseason because Blake Snell and Josh Hader, as we're recording this, just for the people that have the context, they're both projected to very much not only hit free agency, but probably be leaving the Padres as well. And those are two guys who, are going to get a lot of looks at them, especially Blake Snell coming off of the season he just had. And Josh Hader, even if he maybe doesn't look like what he was at the peak of his powers in Milwaukee, still a very good player that I'm sure a number of teams are going to be calling for his help for the 2024 season and beyond. So still more losses to be coming for the San Diego Padres, unfortunately. We're going to see what the future is going to be for this organization going forward. And are they going to be trying to compete? Like you said, as you said, there's still plenty of talent there. They still have, two pieces there that you could say is the face of the franchise, with Machado being the veteran face and Fernando Tatis, who they want to be like the young face of the future. But he needs to stay on the field for 162 games again, which it's been a little bit of time since he's been able to do that. So we'll see what things are going to be there. Padres is definitely a team to look at as we go through the rest of the offseason, because, again, we're really so young into this thing. This is still the start of it. And what a start it was. They always talk about, ending things with a bang, Bars, not a whimper. Well, this offseason started with a bang. And it started with Soto, and it continued because, James, Showtime is back in Los Angeles, but not in basketball. Shout out to the Lakers tournament win, by the way. It's not in basketball. It is in baseball. Shohei Ohtani is signing, or has signed basically, with the Los Angeles Dodgers. 10 years. And you are not hearing this wrong, people. $700 million. $700 million. Now, it's funny because you mentioned like deferred stuff on like previous contracts before, Bars. Jeff Passan did say something along the lines of talking about how there are deferments on this contract. We are laymen. At the end of the day, $700 million is still $700 million. So Shohei Ohtani, multiple time MVP, both his MVPs actually being unanimous. So it just goes to show that this dude has been the guy in baseball for the most part for the last couple of years. And we've seen the talent on both ends. And I don't mean both ends in terms of hitting and defense. No, ladies and gentlemen, I mean in terms of hitting and pitching. We all know at this point, if you're a baseball fan listening to this, the unicorn that is Shohei Ohtani, the modern day Babe Ruth with his two-way ability. Not going to be showing off that two-way ability in 2024 because he got his second Tommy John surgery in order to fix things. He was injured in terms of pitching,
but still made $70 million. Sorry.
I thought you were going to say for a second, Bars, but he's still able to hit 45 home runs.
With that too. Like, it's just insane. It's just insane.
So, what a move this was for the Dodgers. And there's multiple ways to tackle this, Bars. I'll let you, with the first crack at this, your reactions to the deal and where you want to go with the discussion on this first, because I think there's a couple different ways that we could start the discussion here. We could start from the Dodgers perspective, or we could start it from the team's perspective that were very close. One team in particular, a lot of people thought it was close to a lock to getting Ohtani.
I want to throw in one more way we could start this, Jurg, and that's just the money. Let's just talk strictly the cash right now. Fair. I don't think anyone understands what $700 million over 10 years is. I don't care that the money, some of it's deferred, it's get paid in the back end. Fine. He's not pitching next year, but this man just made literally two star players worth of contracts. And that's really what he's worth. Let's be honest. But let's blow your mind real quick, Jurg. Not only did he make the record to be the most paid, the greatest paid athlete ever with $700 million. It's the highest any athlete's been paid ever. But this man also broke the record of the average annual salary that was clipped last year by Verlander and Scherzer, basically, with the $43 million or whatever the hell it was they stole from the Mets. And just to even more mind-blowing, this man in 1 year is making less than two franchises' opening day rosters did last year. Like, how insane is that? That's the Orioles and the Athletics, by the way. You didn't need me to tell you that. Everyone just knew it was them or the Royals. But it's just, this is, you can't even picture 700 million. Like, if you were to have 700 million in a room with you, you wouldn't even believe.
My brain would be broken.
All right. Now that we got that out of the way.
Can I actually, real quick, can I give you a little bit, just because we start with that, please. I think it's perfect. Let me give a little bit more context because, I like searching this stuff up from time to time. And I know a lot of people, when this happened, people were making all the comparisons. They're like, the biggest ones, like Mike Trout, his teammate had the biggest one in total value in baseball. And then Mahomes with his contract in the NFL. We can bring this to global too. The two biggest contracts prior to the signing of Ohtani here, Ronaldo and Messi in soccer. Now, there's a difference with euros and US dollars, but thankfully, at least from what I'm looking at, there is a contract total value thing given to me here. So thank you. With Ronaldo's total deal, it's well over $500 million. And with Messi's deal that he had got previously from Barcelona, I don't think he ended up finishing the full deal with Barcelona. Of course, he ended up going to PSG. This ain't a soccer podcast. I'm just saying, like, for context. But what his total deal was with Barcelona was a 4-year contract that the total contract value, according to US dollars, was $674 million. This is the richest contract in team sports history. And I think the only other, like, aside from Messi and Ronaldo, the only other people that can maybe even compete with this would be like what some of the boxing guys have gotten in terms of total that. And I think this still surpasses plenty of those. So
it's not a golf podcast, but live guys are getting paid a lot. I'm just saying
that too. but just overall, yes, Bars, I'm with you. $700 million. It breaks the pain. You were talking about being put in a room with that money. You could put me in a room with just $4 million and my brain would just be malfunctioning. That if you're telling me that's mine, let alone 700 million. I was making the joke with my friend, like, how do you think he could buy the state of Connecticut with that? And he probably couldn't. But, like, come on, you're telling me 700. But are you telling me right now $700 million? I think, let's be real here. All due respect, if you listen to us from either of these states, I apologize. But you're telling me Shohei Ohtani couldn't buy both Dakotas if he wanted to right now? Come on now.
You can buy a highway for sure. At least a highway.
Oh my God. He could build the Continental Highway. It's going to go from California to Japan. Funny enough, he'll just be driving.
Insane. I just can't believe it, Jurg. I just can't. It's when I saw the number, my jaw dropped. It made sense, but it was just like, wow, that's really, what a world. What a world we lived in.
And you can split it right down where 35 million of that is for the hitting. $35 million when he's able to do it in 2025 and beyond is going to be for the pitching. So they basically, like, people were talking about, you're basically paying two players in one. The Dodgers literally did that. So let's actually go straight to the Dodgers here with the first aspect of this, Bars, because they are the team that paid that man his money. The Dodgers very much, I don't know what you want to call it in terms of what they did with this contract, but they broke the scale, to say the very least. The Dodgers get Showtime. What does this do for LA, who just had another disappointing end to a season, which, let's be real here, was marred with a lot of injuries to that rotation?
I mean, it boosted, well, in the long term, it basically solidified the Dodgers where they've always been, where we always known they've been. And honestly, were any of us shocked when we saw the number and it came from the Dodgers? No, because just like, the Yankees and hopefully now my new Mets, they're just an endless, bottomless money pit. Don't know where they get it from. They pay way too many guys. Then they get rid of some of these guys. They just have the formula perfectly. Like, look at what's it called? When Scherzer was there, they knew what they didn't want him. They'd let him go. They got it down pat, man. But from the LA Dodgers side for this next year, that's an extra bat that you needed. You are correct. They were very injury riddled this year. But imagine, now you can afford some of those injuries because you got Showtime. And now chances are he's probably going to last even longer in the season because he's not going to be pitching. So now you got his bat even more. You got it every game guaranteed. And it's just he's strictly focused on batting. He's been this good focusing on both sides of the game. Now imagine if for just a year straight he is doing nothing but focusing on hitting the ball. I would not be shocked if we see 60 home runs next year from the man, I swear.
Right.
But aside from that, it gives the Dodgers an uplift that they didn't even need because now you got Will Smith, you got Freddie Freeman, you got Mookie Betts, you got Max Muncy. Like, what more can you need? And aside from that, there's rumors that even towards the end of the contract, yes, everyone's worried he might not pitch for the whole length of his career. You're telling me you don't think he'd be a great outfielder? And they don't really have any good outfielders like that besides Mookie. So just throw him in the outfield towards that end of the contract. And it's just, I think it's a phenomenal deal. Some people think he got paid way too much. I had a Yankee fan who's a friend of mine said, He'd rather pay Soto $450, which, by the way, Soto is not making $450. That man's making $600 plus now, probably. Definitely over $500. But he said he'd rather pay Soto $450 than pay Shohei Ohtani $700 million. And I have to strongly disagree. I'm not just saying it because the Yankees got Soto. I'm just saying this is don't get me wrong, Juan Soto, generational talent. Shohei Ohtani is a once-in-a-lifetime talent.
Literally.
You will never see this man again. The only time anyone's even come close is Babe Ruth. And let's be honest, Babe Ruth couldn't even freaking shine his cleats. I don't know, man. It's just insane, dude. I'm talking bad about the Babe, but this is literally Showtime. So good for the Dodgers, man. Did they need another thing? No, but you want to talk about the evil empire coming back? They never left. The Dodgers are here. They got Showtime. Man doesn't even have to move out of his house now. He could stay in the nice mansion, still deal with the LA traffic.
Yeah, still deal with the LA traffic. We know the reporters that are following him are going to be happy too, because it's a funny thing I heard like in the days leading up to this, Bars, is that the reporters like from Japan that like their job is to follow him around for every single game. They were worried about moving out of LA to Toronto if he was going to end up going there, and they were going to be concerned about having to move to the cold of Toronto. But hey, that's kind of what has to happen. You know, I've also moved to a colder state from where I was before for a job. And, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. So, but you know, they get to be very happy that they stay in LA, and I'm sure Ohtani is as well, going with a team that, like you said, Bars, the talent that's there is so massive. And, you know, you talk about kind of as close to perfecting the formula as you can. You know, this is a Dodgers team that has spent, for our entire baseball watching lives, like they've been willing to spend money over and over and over. And back in the day, we always thought the $140 million contracts or something. Now they're getting out this much is insane. And they also have the Mookie Betts deal there as well. But it's funny because I think, you know, as we reach the end of Clayton Kershaw's time with the Dodgers, and this is a team that did finally get the World Series a couple years ago, you know that one World Series isn't good enough for, you know, the luster that is Los Angeles. They want to get plenty more. And, you know, this is a team that I mentioned. I know Shohei is not going to be pitching in 2024, as we've already said, but 2025, Walker Buehler, you know, he'll be back in 2024. He'll get back in a rhythm. Maybe, and Buehler was looking like a Cy Young candidate before he got hurt in 2022. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a Walker Buehler who in 2025 could be back at his powers. You're talking about at least one or two of the other young arms they have right now. Plus, you add in Ohtani, and the fact that, you know, again, you talk about perfecting the formula. How many NL Rookie of the Year candidates has this team just been churning out over the last decade plus? You know, you mentioned knowing when to let guys go. I mean, no, he's looked really good since he left, and maybe you could have argued it, but Corey Seager was a guy who in LA, if it wasn't for all the injury issues, he would still be a Dodger.
Oh, yeah. And 100%. They just didn't feel safe about that.
Exactly, which is, to be fair, like he could have signed with Texas and things could have ended horribly. It just so happens it didn't. But, you know, they had Corey Seager for his time. He performed for them. They had Cody Bellinger in his time. He won an MVP with them. They've had so many of these guys who, like, the best years of their career were being Los Angeles Dodgers. And, you know, they leave and it's kind of hit or miss. But they know when to keep guys and they know when to let them go. This is a team that has perfected it because their general manager, Friedman, he was the guy in Tampa Bay that built them up in the early part of the 2010s. This dude goes to LA with that budget, those resources, that massive scouting department. Oh my God. Like the Dodgers, this is going to be a team that's going to be competing for the World Series for a while. And people are going to make the jokes that, okay, when they get 100 wins again and they lose early again, we'll see. But if you're LA, like this really gives you some good odds in what the future success could be for this organization. So that's what LA did. Let's switch this. We know who we're going to talk about here to finish this off. Well, let's talk about the middle portion of the conversation, Bars. We talked about the money. We talked about the Dodgers. Now let's talk about the bridesmaids that we could say. Bridesmaid, never the bride, could be one or two of these teams that were also in the Ohtani discussions. We saw in tweets after that he signed that there was 4 other teams that were relatively believed to be in talks for Ohtani. And that was the Blue Jays, the Giants, the Cubs, weirdly, and the Angels. It was never going to stay in Los Angeles. Chicago, I don't know, were you just offering him some deep dish pizza while he was making his decision? Because we know he wasn't going to sign with the Cubs. Let's be real here. So really, to me, logically, and the two of us that actually talked about this again, back to the trade deadline episode that we did earlier in this year, we talked about the Giants that we thought could have been a contender because he would still have been staying on the West Coast. Still, the media would have been favorable to him. You know, the population, the fan base would have been there. Like, there would have been a lot of support. I firmly believe it, especially because the Giants have been trying to be big-time players over the last couple of off seasons, last year in particular, which I mentioned bridesmaid, never the bride, because, dear Lord, poor San Francisco, this is the third time it's happened to them. But this is the team I really want to mention. And we had actually, we had some text about this, when it happened, Bars. The Toronto Blue Jays, the day before Shohei signed, there was a tweet that came out saying that he was on a plane heading towards Toronto, apparently, heading into Canada. And it's funny, when the contract came out, I think, I don't want to misword you exactly here, Bars, but you had kind of said, like, man, poor Toronto, basically, that they were that close, and the Dodgers kind of did this to just steal him from him. So I want to hear that from you, Bars. Like, you firmly believe, and I can get behind this idea as well, that Shohei was, how close do you think he was to being with the Blue Jays before this final offer?
I think he was a Blue Jay, if I'm being completely honest. This whole thing was close on the wraps. Shohei made it very obvious. He said, if anyone finds out I visited you, or if anyone knows we're talking, that's it. Boom, you're out the sweepstakes. Which I think partially is why Chicago bowed out, because those rumors leaked. And aside from that, like we said, why the hell is he going to Chicago? So they wanted to save themselves a little respectability and saying we're bowing out instead of Shohei saying it for them. But I fully believed he was Blue Jay. If you really look at their roster, he was exactly what they needed to get over the hump. He gives you that pitching in 2 years, which with that rotation, I'm not sure how the contract situations look, so they might lose a guy or two. But with Kevin Gausman, Chris Bassett, Jose Barrios, and then you add in Shohei, that would have been insane. The Yankees would have been terribly scared even with the Soto trade if he had gone there. I think just because of how astronomically big this contract was, because you had a lot of reporters saying not a single reporter touched 700, and 700 seems just a little too right on the line. I feel like we had a little Aaron Judge situation going here, which you mentioned the bridesmaid San Francisco. I think it happened to the Blue Jays here, man, where they offered him a contract. He was flying there. He probably was about to talk to them one last time and to really agree to it. And then LA said, hang on, hear me out. And they just slid him the blank check. He wrote a number, and then it was a done deal, because not a single reporter thought he was touching 700. You had some people say 650 was probably the top, which if on Toronto, they probably offered him 600 or something. They had to be up there. It's insane. It's just so much money, Jurg. I can't stop thinking about the money. But LA definitely did a little last Hail Mary here with the money. They probably had a number set in their mind where, hey, no matter what, we're going to this number. If we get outbid, we get outbid. And good for them, because if there was ever a time you were going to do it for a guy, this is the guy. This is a guy worth two men, literally. Two positions worth. It's just his WAR, I can't even imagine what that number is. It's just insane.
Because it's WAR for two positions. And this is a guy at Shohei who earlier in his career, the ERA was kind of up there, but he's really gotten that work down to a point where, like, it wasn't even a joke, where he was both a Cy Young and an MVP candidate last season.
Yeah,
it's the funniest thing in the world. And he's going to be that again once he's back. He's already come back from Tommy John once. I refuse to think he can't do it at least one more time here. And especially with the Dodgers, where, again, you talk about with the pitching rotation they have with Walker Buehler being the ace there. This guy has no issue. Like, he's going to be the second, maybe third guy, depending on how the farm system continues to develop there. You talk about the fact that Shohei is going to go from the ace of the Angels to being the second or third guy on the Dodgers. Again, expectations and workload, where it's less stress on him. Oh, it's going to be beautiful. But I'm with you. And when you text me that, man, I firmly believe that. I think the Toronto Blue Jays had a very good offer. 550, maybe $600 million, I think, in that range. I don't know how much more would have gone from there. And I think Ohtani's group must have told LA, hey, this is your last chance. And once LA heard the number, I think they literally said, all right, we're going to go 100 million over no matter what. I'm with you. I'm firmly convinced that's what happened. I think LA probably thought to themselves, we will have one last big money, up on this. And they also definitely believe that no matter what the uppage was, that the other team was not going to match. And Toronto, my heart hurts for Toronto. And I hope we do get, like, right now, this is to an extent hearsay. We kind of believe that, he was on the plane to Toronto. We believe this is going to happen. I want like a 30 for 30 type production of, like, because they made the 30 for 30 about what's it called? I think it was the 4 days in October when the Red Sox came back to beat the Yankees. We need a 30 for 30 on these 4 days in December that led to Shohei Ohtani. This, I want to hear everything. I want to hear what the Blue Jays offer was. I want to hear the Giants, when they knew they were out of this. I want to hear why the Cubs even bothered to think they had a chance in this. I want to hear it all. And I want to hear the Dodgers say, like you said, it'd be the funniest thing if they were like, blank check, what do you want? And Shohei's team said 700 million. And they said, we'll do it. Like, whatever it was, however this happened, I want this. And the way this needs to end, Bars, that the way that 30 for 30 needs to end is the tears of Los Angeles Angels ownership and fans. I'm sorry, fans. I actually don't really hate you, but just to add the drama to it, we're in the media business. We need to add the effect, the pure pain of the Los Angeles Angels. This is going to be the last portion of this that we're going to discuss here, Bars. The Los Angeles Angels in 6 seasons with Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. 3 MVP winners because Trout won his 3rd MVP while Ohtani was there. 3 total MVP awards, 0 playoff appearances, 0 playoff games, 0 playoff. It'd be one thing if they had at least made the playoffs, like maybe 2 times, and they had got swept out both times. Okay, whatever. You didn't even make the playoffs.
Yeah.
You didn't even make the postseason with what we all consider the 2 greatest players in baseball of this generation, since the dawn of the millennium. These are probably the top 2 guys, arguably. Jesus Lord, God, the Angels are bad. This was my immediate reaction to when I had seen the news a day or so ago. I hope it's still up there because I could give you the exact word for word thing that I said. It is. I said, trade Trout, sell the team, scorched earth, purge, whatever the heck needs to be, whatever the heck you want to say it. This entire franchise needs to be reset. If you couldn't win anything with those 2, it's over. But especially this past year's Bars where, again, we finally saw the Angels get aggressive, and it blew up in their face. And they didn't even say, you know what? We're just going to keep these guys. Maybe some of them, depending on what their contracts were, if they leave, they leave. Maybe if they're any of the guys they traded for, if they still had a year, maybe you could trade them in the offseason, recoup something. Nope. They said they just cut them all. They sent them all down into what is the weirdest second half of the season I think a team has had in a while. And that's saying a lot for baseball. The Angels completely collapsed. They were gung-ho. They weren't going to trade Ohtani. And this has happened. I'm not going to ask you what do the Angels do from here, Bars, because the answer is just pain. So what I am going to ask you is, do you think they'll actually end up trading Mike Trout, which a lot of people, myself included, will be calling for the next bit? Because at this point, free the man.
Unfortunately, sorry, baseball community, I don't think so. I mean, if you see it from their perspective, why would you? You're going to trade him for a couple of prospects or players that are not going to sell tickets at the very least. It's the biggest travesty to baseball that these 2 players did not make at least 1 playoff game. It's just the biggest. We haven't seen Mike Trout in a playoff game in what has it been, 10 plus years, I believe. Not 10 plus, it feels like it, but it's just, I don't see how they do it. You've heard me say it before in multiple episodes, Jurg, where some of these smaller market teams, they just, they sign people for tickets. That's it. Look at Carlos Correa and Minnesota Twins, this last contract. You could say they were making a move, but honestly, I think it was just a name move for sell tickets. And unfortunately, I don't see how, if you're LA, if you had ample opportunities before to get the most you possibly could get for Mike Trout, where it could have been a future altering move where it might even set you up to look like a San Diego Padres or something like that in the near future. But if you haven't taken any of those windows now, and let's be honest, I love Mike Trout. He was the greatest player in baseball before Showtime appeared. Now he's kind of trending a little downward. All the injuries are catching up. The age is there. I'm not saying he's still not a great player. He's still in the top 5 conversation. Hell, even top 3. But he's not that solidified number 1 anymore. And yes, that's tough with Shohei. Take Shohei out the picture. I still wouldn't put him as a solidified number 1 player in all of baseball. So I don't see how you trade him if you're the Angels. If you do trade him, you're not going to get what you should have got for him many years ago. So it's not looking good for you Angels fans. I'm sorry.
It's really not. And, to the postseason thing you mentioned there, Bars, 2014 was the last time Mike Trout was in the postseason.
Almost 10 years. Look at that.
2014. And this is a guy who, in his it's funny because you mentioned the age. How old do you think Mike Trout is? Without looking it up, Bars, how old do you think he is?
Feels like he's 33, but he's probably like 28, 29.
All right, well, you're closer on your first guess. He's 32.
Oof. See, I'm holding him young in my heart. That's what it is. I want Mike Trout to last and have a playoff series, but it's not looking like it.
It's funny you say that, man, because it feels like that. Mike Trout has been, if you want to include his first full season was 2012, but he played for 40 games in 2011. This guy has been in front of all of us in terms of being at the top of his game, basically since the turn of the last decade. And this is a guy who has literally seen. I can't technically say seen it all with the Angels, because when you say seen it all, that means there's been some good. There's been a lot of bad in his time with the Angels, and just disappointment after disappointment for him. You're probably right in terms of that he won't get dealt because Artie Moreno is the owner, and when was the last time that dude ever did anything right? We're still waiting. But no, like I'm hoping for him. This is where I need to let the weird optimism I save for pockets like this occur. I hope this dude somehow gets traded because he don't deserve to be there anymore. They haven't deserved him, like you said, for a long time. And you mentioned the fact that you weren't going to get what you could have gotten years ago. You could almost say the same thing about how they just dealt with Ohtani. They could have traded him at the deadline. There could have been some foresight to say, you know what, this team isn't sustainable for the second half of the season, which I think a lot of people still thought. And the fact that they decided to make the decision to be buyers, okay, that was a unique move. Maybe it works out. It didn't. They lost Ohtani for nothing. They could have gotten something. They didn't. I think if this is a case where they need to begin the conversations with Trout and his representation and what has to occur here, because man, it's not good. And we know, money-wise, whatever's left on Trout's deal, because we knew, like, as we said, the biggest total value contract before Ohtani's was Trout's in terms of baseball history. As we talked about a couple times here with deferments, when teams trade these players, and teams that trade them still hold them, like, some of the money over and they still pay the guys. Like, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think someone will be willing to take on Mike Trout, even with the contract, because they know the Angels have to pay it like some pretty penny in terms of that. But if you're LA, man, like, just this is just pure ugliness, to say the very least. But maybe you're right. Maybe they are just going to keep him, and he just has to stay in. I don't know. I think purgatory is too kind of a word to describe the Angels.
Oh, it's hell. It's hell. It's not purgatory. It's hell, Jurg. The red on the Angels, they're just the Angels of hell, basically, literally. I just real quick note though, honestly, with his contract, it's just, yeah, there's deferral. Yeah, the Angels could eat some of it, but like, you really got to ask yourself, what team is going to take that contract? Let's say the Angels eat, he's making $35.5 million a year, basically, for the next 7 years. What team's going to eat that? Even if let's say the Angels eat 10 million of it. You know what? Actually, no, I'm talking to myself. It's not bad, but 10 million per year, realistically, they're not going to do that. They're not going to take off and make it a $25 million a year contract, because then you realize what you're losing. Unless you get basically a team's 1, 2, 3 top 10 farm prospects, you're not eating that 10 million a year to trade Mike Trout. So I just truly believe, and I think, the owner might just have a weird love thing with Trout where he just wants him because he knows it's Mike Trout. That's his only victory, is the fact that he was able to re-sign that man and keep him to the franchise, so could be sentimental, could just be the Angels being dumb, but I can't picture it. I don't see them doing it.
Hey, we hope for you. Hashtag free Mike Trout. Let's get that trending right now on Twitter once this is posted, because he deserves it. He very much deserves it indeed. But yes, the entire saga of Ohtani. This was certainly interesting, to say the very least, Bars. Again, I want there to be something about this, and for it to be a high quality thing when this is eventually done years down the line, and what this entire experience for free agency was like. So that being said, the two biggest signings, well, one of them wasn't a signing, it was a trade. The two biggest transactions of the 2023 MLB offseason were concluded in pretty quick order. But that being said, just because the biggest names are fully off the market, guys, it doesn't necessarily mean the action that stops in it of itself. To finish this off, like we said at the open of the show, Bars and I, we're just going to quickly list some of the more notable names that are going to be, in the rumors / reports here in this offseason of, teams are going to go after them. And we're not going to go player by player in terms of like trying to match for a team here necessarily, but what we are mainly going to be doing is that we're going to just be, give you a good list of names and then say like, hey, from this list of names, what teams do we think could try to get a little bit aggressive this season or this offseason? Because if there's one thing that 2023 showed us, there's a couple teams that I think they could stand to make some of these moves, and I think would be willing to make some of these moves if they think they could get in the postseason, especially what's happened the last couple of years with some wild card teams making some runs. It kind of feels like in baseball, things can happen if you just hit your stride at the right time, and maybe some of these names can help. So let's start with some of the pitchers. We'll just go like the top 4 names here that are available with pitchers. I mentioned 2 of them earlier, but Blake Snell and Josh Hader, both free agents from the San Diego Padres. Josh Hader, probably the best reliever available in this offseason period, and Blake Snell, probably the best starter as well. So two very top tier caliber guys that are going to be having many suitors for sure. Both of them, one of them might sign by the time this episode is posted, if we're being fully honest, because that's how good and that's how sought after these two are. They're both going to get paid. Marcus Stroman, I think, is another guy who has had his ups and downs. Bars being a Mets fan would be able to speak to that, but is still a relatively reliable guy. Probably could be your third at best at this point, and maybe some teams could be looking for a third guy, and Stroman could certainly fill in that role. He could get probably the last big contract of his career, if we're being fully honest, for his, and a decent 2023, not spectacular in any way, shape, or form, but decent enough 2023 could get him one last payday. And I know we both mentioned him earlier in this one, Bars, but Yoshinobu Yamamoto, he's going to be the top guy that, again, Yankees, Dodgers, Giants are like the top three teams that I mentioned. Because it's funny, you were mentioning how the Yankees going after him. The Dodgers, despite the fact that you're not Ohtani, they're still going after this kid. They're still trying to find a way that they could get this kid in there. I don't understand. I don't know.
How? And the Padres are taking out loans, like it just doesn't make sense.
It's wild, to say the very least. So that's happening. Let's go to some hitters here real quick. Matt Chapman, who was in Toronto for 2 years. It feels just yesterday that he was traded to Toronto, but 2 years into Toronto, nothing spectacular. His offensive production took a dip in 2023, but he did get another Gold Glove on his resume, so still a solid defensive infielder there for you. Who could still hit. I think last year was a bit of aberration. I still think he could get you like 20, 25 home runs in a good
Started off the year real hot last year. I thought he was going to be candidate for almost that first 2 months of the season. He was an MVP candidate. I believe he had his home runs up to like 14 or something like that, and then it just took a major dip.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be looking for a rebound for himself personally. There, you want to talk about a guy on a team that had a lot of success over the last 2 years. Rhys Hoskins is someone who recent injury history aside, has been a guy who's pretty consistent bat for the Philadelphia Phillies, and I could definitely see a team taking a chance on him potentially, or the Phillies maybe trying to make a push here to try to keep him. We do know they did just keep one of the guys in their rotation earlier in the offseason. I think Nola was who they signed for the long term. So there's that. Cody Bellinger, someone who had his 1 year rehabilitation stint with the Cubs, and man, this kid did pretty good. Got a lot of people believing in him again. He's going to be someone who has a couple suitors. He was a suitor at the trade deadline that we thought before he ended up staying, and now in free agency he could bounce back here. Tim Anderson, was there with the White Sox for a while. Again, it feels like just a couple years ago he was still so young and had so much energy, and the White Sox just killed that out of him. We'll see if he goes to a different team and get out of that hellhole that's known as Chicago. Well, for the White Sox in particular. Cubs might have some sort of future. Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who was traded from the Blue Jays to the Arizona Diamondbacks, part of this team that just made the surprise World Series run. Going to be interesting to see how he cashes out. Teoscar Hernandez, a guy that we've mentioned multiple times on previous baseball shows, Bars. We're both fans of him and just being a consistent guy in your lineup. Could get a decent little contract for himself. And Jorge Soler, just, not an everyday player, but a guy who he's been in spot moments, can hit home runs. He was a good veteran for the Marlins the last couple of years, was part of the Atlanta Braves team that ended up winning the World Series. So proven veteran. Like a glue guy, basically helps the locker room vibes. That reliable person. People are going to be.
He gets hot. He's hot. That's his main thing. When he gets hot, you'll get those 10 home runs in 3 weeks spread out or something. But when he's cold, he's under the Mendoza line.
Under the Mendoza line, to say the very least. And the Mendoza line is the standard on the show, by the way, whenever me and Bars run it, ladies and gentlemen. So that being said, Bars, we have the names here. Like we said, we're not necessarily going to be going through, one by one for them. But, with this list of names that we've presented, and maybe if there's one or two other guys that you want to mention, you can. But what are some teams that you could envision, like one or two teams that you see is going to be willing to dole out a little bit of cash this offseason in order to try to get some of these guys on their roster and try to make a little bit of a run at things for 2024?
I think, honestly, if you look at the Phillies, I feel like they might make a push over here, Josh Hader. So, they need a closer. Yes, that closer by community. It's weird. I don't even know how to explain it because I'm just personally not a fan of it. In baseball, you need your closer, you need your setup man, you need your bullpen set up the way it should be. That's just how I feel. I don't trust any of this analytics stuff, but I think they need a solidified closer. I've said it for years. Yes, right now, currently, their bullpen's probably better than it's been of recent years, but they never had that stud. And I think if you bring that stud in Josh Hader, you're going to see a big difference because when you bring a closer like that, it takes pressure off the rest of your bullpen as well. So, gives you more options to play with, gets you that solidified guy, might be the next step they need to make. But aside from the Philadelphia Phillies, I think Josh Hader might go, believe it or not. Yes, Evan Phillips had a great season. Don't be shocked if the Dodgers come for that guy. I swear to God, I can just see it already. Tell me if they strike out on Yamamoto, they make a move on Hader. It's going to be something like that. Hader is obviously the number one closer out of this whole free agency. His contract's probably going to eclipse Edwin Diaz's, and deservingly so. But I think he's going to come to an all-time winner because after playing for the Brewers and not really making it that far deep run per usual, and then going to San Diego and experiencing the essentially lackluster run that they had, because what his trade to San Diego was supposed to be the lock-in. This is the piece we need to make the next step, and it just didn't work out that way, as you said, Jurg. He hasn't looked his hottest, but he still has fire cannon for an arm. So I think he's the name to look out for in terms of pitchers. Yamamoto, obviously, I'm not going to get any more into it aside from this is the new guy. One thing about this is I'm always scared of pitchers that are coming from the Japanese league, because after Ohtani's success, it feels like everyone is just trying to go for that next guy. They're dipping into this international pool with the Japanese league and whatnot, just want the next Ohtani. And unfortunately, that's probably going to make you strike out more often than not. If we look at Senga, yes, Senga, he towards the end of the year started becoming a great pitcher. But from what I've seen, I'm not sure if Senga is ever going to be a number one pitcher. He's a number two. He's a really good number three. But for what he was signed for, he was almost signed to be like the next ace, because we all knew Scherzer and Verlander weren't going to last long. And if you look at, for example, we've been bashing them all episode, but there's a reason we're bashing them. You look at the Cubs. They got, I think his name's Kurt Suzuki. I forget, but Suzuki's his last name. He was expected to be a real big up-and-coming five-tool player who was going to make a difference in that lineup. And I'm pretty sure he bats lower than fifth in that lineup currently. I think he is, as you said, our Sanders Mendoza line. He likes dipping under it every once in a while. So, everyone tries hitting this home run in the Japanese league, and I feel like it leads to failure more than not. Yamamoto, I think he's going to be great. I think he's not going to be this cause, but I think he's going to be more of a possibly a Tanaka than a Ohtani.
Right. I mean, to be fair, though, Tanaka, that's not a bad line there. Like,
not bad at all.
A pretty solid career for the Yankees. And you mentioned with the Cubs, Seiya Suzuki, the hitter that they got. Like, definitely some inconsistencies. They hope he puts together a more consistent season. 20 home runs is fine. Like, I think a lot of people, when they hear you say that, they're like, I don't know, but 20 home runs is fine. 286 batting average is, in today's baseball, pretty good. But you expect a little bit more, and
wasn't
like
what they signed him for.
Exactly.
But there's a difference to interrupt you.
Yep.
One great thing about Suzuki is he brings memes, and I know you love those memes. You know exactly what memes I'm talking about.
Yes. I'm all for the meme. That's why I have to come to his defense right there. It's like, come on, Bart. He gives us the content. We need the content. But no, like, in all seriousness, I'm kind of with you with that mindset of these teams trying to find their next hit. But this is what sports is, right? We talked about this in previous episodes, Bart. All sports. It's a copycat league, and they see something succeed for someone, they're going to try to copy it as well. And that's kind of what a lot of teams are doing here. In this case, and I think you mentioned with Yamamoto, I want to see how his play transitions to MLB ultimately. I don't think this is very much early projections. Like, I'm not an expert with saying this. I don't know if he'll necessarily be an ace, but it wouldn't surprise me if he can become a number 2, number 3, which I think is what some of these teams are hoping for. And you kind of mentioned your pick for a team that you think could definitely get some investing in here with Hader. When you mentioned the Dodgers, I'll stay in the NL West, and man, I know they just had a pretty disappointing season. But I think the Giants. I think the Giants are going to go after not just one of these pitchers. We know they're in the conversation for Yamamoto. There's like some not fear, like that's not the proper word, but with the Yankees and Dodgers both being in there's questions of, will the Giants get in again? Do you want to lose to both those teams in bidding again? But I mentioned Stroman earlier. Snell's going to be out there. And the hitters that we mentioned in the likes of Bellinger, Anderson, Lourdes Gurriel, who they could be stealing away from the Diamondbacks. There's a lot of solid players here for the Giants who they've been striking out on the stars. Go at that next level if you're the Giants and try to get a little bit more consistency back in this team, which, let's be real here. A couple seasons ago, when they were the 100-plus wins and they barely took the NL West, we all knew that was a fluke season. Mm-hmm. That was one last gasp of a hoorah of all the guys on that team playing way above the standards of what we expected of all of them. And we've seen what's happened the last 2 years when they've come back down to earth. This is a team, and that was an old team as well that had that.
Buster Posey was having an MVP year that year.
Buster Posey, who then would, I think at the end of that season,
rode away into the sunset.
Yep, he retired. Brendan Crawford, who I think he's a free agent actually. He's in his mid-30s. Like, a lot of guys were old on that team, man. And you get a couple of these guys here in free agency, late 20s, early 30s still, but you get the guys younger compared to what you've had the last few seasons, but you get them in there, some new blood, some new faces in this organization, some new pieces to try to help out in San Francisco. I think that's what the Giants need. So I could very much see the Giants going at that more second tier of free agents here in the offseason, because we've seen what's been happening the last couple of years in terms of going at the top of the top. They're in the conversations. They just tend to keep on losing in them. So why not go for that next group of guys? Instead of getting the one big name, get 2 or 3 names in there, plug them into the lineup. And that can very much help you out. So I definitely think the Giants are a team to be looking out for. We both just went NL here, Bars. Let's give the AL a little bit of love, except the AL Central. We don't like that division at all. That's just ugly baseball that gets played. But maybe an AL East or an AL West team more so. No, but in all seriousness, who's the team that you think could get a little bit aggressive over in the AL, Bars, with this free agency class?
Oh, man, the AL is just like a real questionable conference at the moment. It feels like it's just the top tier guys, and then everyone down low is just trying to really not spend their money. To be honest, like you said, these second tier players, they could go anywhere, which is why I don't really have a definitive team that could end up spending money. These second tier guys, whatever team does want to follow this strategy, they need to go along the Atlanta Braves strategy, where they made sure they got all the pieces when Ronald Acuna went down that year they won the World Series. They traded all of these second tier players where when you saw it, it was like, oh, what kind of move is that? But all those pieces together made up for Ronald Acuna, which ended up leading to the World Series. So I'm not sure what team I'm expecting here to be making these moves. If you really take a look at it, hopefully Baltimore adds a few veterans in there to make the difference for their essentially young team who that just, let's be honest, they fell flat when they made it to the playoffs last year. But it wasn't really a shocker they fell flat when you saw the age and the youth, and no one thought Baltimore was going to be there to begin with. You kind of expected them to fall short. So maybe a veteran presence there could help them out with their playoff abilities. Other than that, I'm not sure what team's going to end up spending money in the AL, because it's kind of a sit and wait until you see, I guess the big names would be Yamamoto and Josh Hader go. Until you see those 2 names, you're not going to see any of these other free agents go anywhere.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. And that's kind of how it goes. It's really much a domino effect. The 2 biggest ones have gone. There's still a couple, decently sized dominoes before the rest goes here. And to your point, Bars, I think the interesting thing is if we look relatively towards the top of most of these divisions, and you look at, the AL East, I think is the biggest example. The top 2 teams in the AL East last season, win total wise, were the Orioles and the Tampa Bay Rays. They're not known for spending the biggest of bucks, right? The Minnesota Twins in the AL Central, just that entire division is not really going to be spending money, we don't think. The Astros, could they not, it's neither here nor there. I think the Astros would maybe point towards injuries as hurting them last season more than anything else. And I think
they still almost had a
exactly. And it wouldn't actually surprise me if the Astros, like, they might do a little something. Like I could see the Astros dipping into maybe some of the quote unquote lower tier 2 names, maybe a high tier 3 name more so, just to kind of even things out. I think for the most part, the Astros are cool with what they have here. But maybe there's some motivation with the fact that the Rangers not only just beat them in the ALCS, but then won the World Series. Could be an in-state rivalry going on there because the last 2 world champions in baseball coming from there. And the third team in the AL West that we expect could be some kind of competitive, just barely missing out on the playoffs this season, the 88-74 Seattle Mariners. How willing are they going to be in terms of spending money, right? Like this is a funny conversation where it's like, in theory, these teams could spend. Are they going to? So I definitely don't blame you. If I did have to think one of these teams might try to make some sort of run, to an extent, you just said their name. I think the Orioles could be the one, just because, they have a lot of their young core set, like you said. And I think it doesn't need to be anything big or flashy. It could just be that one guy, or maybe they go after and surprise us and get the biggest name of them all in terms of pitching as well. Oh, not Hader per se, but maybe Blake Snell, if they could make a surprise run there, bring him back into the AL, that'd be a nice one. Or even, we just talked about how they possibly struck out here with Ohtani. Could the Blue Jays get a little bit more talent back in there? Insurge this team that has so many great guys with Bichette and Vladdy in that starting rotation, like you said. They could surround those guys. And you talk about a team falling flat in the playoff, Bars. A lot of errors by this team, and especially mental errors for this team. Maybe they're a team I mentioned, kind of like the lesser named guys. Maybe, well, not Stroman. I don't know if they'd be willing to bring him back to Toronto. But maybe another one of the pitchers there. Maybe they could bring in a Jorge Soler into that lineup. Just as a steady presence. I think could do that team well. Honestly, on a consistent basis. Maybe a Tim Anderson there. No, I don't know if that would help out positionally because he plays more the middle infield and you already have that set. But just that kind of player is more what I mean. That guy who could be a consistent force there because, like Toronto, and we talk about a promising team that didn't deliver the way we thought. Yes, they made the postseason. They were extremely disappointing with how they went out of the playoffs last season. So I think that's a team that it wouldn't surprise me if they look at things because they just were in the Ohtani convo. You can't let your offseason end just based off of that. You have to keep trying to push for some kind of improvement.
I mean, I agree with you, but the only moves I see Toronto doing is kind of let's retain our guys. Let's keep Matt Chapman. Let's try to see if we could get Gurriel stay here. Let's just try and build our depth. They could bring Hernandez back. I forget if he was with Seattle or if he got traded to Toronto. Either way, he got traded from one of the other teams. I feel like, they could add a couple pieces here, but after they struck out on Ohtani, I think that was their big move. It kind of feels like San Francisco last year where they struck out on Judge and they tried spending money on Correa, struck out on him. Now it's like, all right, well, let's sign a couple of these guys, but you didn't feel good about it at all. It was kind of just let's spend a couple bucks here and there. So I'm getting this eerie feeling with Toronto that they're kind of in the same boat. They might end up like my Mets where it's just let's retain our guys. And then, the fans are going to say, yeah, we can make the run again. It's just not going to happen. The one team I will give you that I completely forgot about that you mentioned was Seattle. They're not afraid to spend money every once in a while. And very much like the Orioles, they have a young core. They have a couple more veterans than the Orioles do. But if they could end up finding a way to just a couple guys, those second-tier guys to build up that depth, I think that'd probably be my second team. If I had to rank it, I'd say it'd be Orioles, Mariners, and then the Astros number 3. Because as you said, injuries really is what hurt their team. But how do you counteract injuries? You throw a couple lower tier guys there that are good for depth. And if there's anything we know about the Astros, they're going to find someone who might be their third tier guy, but he's a tier 2 guy in a lot of other teams.
Yep, exactly. And he's going to play at a high level. Absolutely. The Astros, they may have lost this year, but please do not count them out, ladies and gentlemen. So aside from all the cheapskates that are in the AL, it looks like it could be a very interesting free agent period in all seriousness, to say the very least. Some pretty good names still out there. I think it's going to be some interesting bidding wars that happen over the next couple of days. Again, it will be interesting, I think, for the two of us once this gets posted, how many of these teams have maybe potentially made moves at that point. I think that's going to be fun to look out for. And speaking of fun, man, this is a fun one to have you back on the show, Bars. I appreciate you, brother. Every single time that we get to do a podcast together, it's one of the funnest things that I get to do. I love working with Chris and Dame. You are very much in that same category as well. Thank you so much for coming on, bro.
Always love.
Let the people know where they can find you and if you got anything in the works.
Oh, man, who knows? The last couple episodes, I always say I got something in the works, but, life's crazy. So, just keep your eyes open. There's been talking to you, as you know, Jurg, been talking to you more on the side. So just keep your eyes open, guys. I think, unfortunately, bumps and bruises might have been the end of it, but who knows? Maybe they'll come back for an 8th season.
An 8th rebranding.
There's something coming. Just keep your eyes open. Bars Talks is going to be behind a mic again soon.
Absolutely. And he just said it there at Bars Talks on Twitter if you want to get the takes from the baseball Don himself. He knows a little bit of football too, ladies and gentlemen. So there's that. That being said, thanks so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on another edition here of the Somewhat Sports Podcast. If you want to make sure you always keep up with what this show is doing at all times, including our weekly NFL picks for this 2023 season, we're really hitting the home stretch here in the competition of things. It's actually pretty close between the three of us, between Dame, Chris, and I. So who's going to win the 3rd season of us doing this? Will Dame or I get a 2nd crown? Will Chris finally win in the regular season for the first time? Who knows? You got to see that as it gets posted on Instagram. And, of course, the return of Clowns and Crowns whenever the boys are back together here at some point. Can't wait to deliver on that. And, of course, NBA talk. We're getting near Christmas. I think this is the time when the NBA season really hits. We're going to be doing that. And maybe a little bit of hockey talk coming here on the program soon as well. But thank you so much for joining us on this specific edition of the show at SomewhatSports on Instagram, Somewhat Space and Sports on YouTube and Spotify. Like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube. 5 stars. Give us a follow over on Spotify. With that being said, thank you all so much for joining us on this episode. And all of you have a very good day.